What was the aim of Cicatrix within the World War I centenary context? What got you started? Why?
I think it was really kind of lead on from a big project that Prue had done with the army, Other Worlds. So there was that kind of connection from her working with them. So Prue kind of approached me and we kind of discussed doing an exhibition together, and then it became kind of apparent that this big centenary was coming up, and because of her kind of association with the army and the association, can you hear me at back?
Yeah.
Good. The association with the army and Wiltshire, I mean, it's such a big thing. And so it seemed a kind of opportunity that we shouldn't miss to work with very difficult subject matter in a county that has the army as such a core bit to it. So I think that's where it stemmed from. And then from those kind of discussions, Susan was an artist that I'd exhibited with and saw and had known her work and really admired it. And Prue, who is the kind of curator, is the one who kind of started to pull us all together. So I'm not sure I'm answering the question particularly, rambling a bit. So I think the aim really was to market, but to market in a very subtle way. So not to take it on as a historical kind of accuracy thing, but take the concept of conflict and scars and use that as a kind of joining point for us. So it's Salisbury Plain and the idea of scars. And I suppose my thing is I worked directly with the plane. Susan was Porton Down, and then Prue is the kind of marks and more emotional side of scars. So I think the idea was to present an exhibition that dealt with World War I, but not in a historical context. So it's what artists can bring to it, how we can kind of take on these important issues and they go through us and come out.
Yeah, in a broader sense, in a very conservative pocket of England.
Because I had quite an emotional response to the exhibition when I saw it the first time, and I don't have obviously any personal experience of that war, but those emotions cross generations, and I think that's one of the things that's been interesting about trying to remember World War I is that nobody's got living memory of it anymore, but there's that desire to keep fresh.
Yeah.
Yes, I suppose not
what happened
to market.
Yeah. Yes, to market and to make it still relevant to not only us but a younger generation as well.
So how did
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I want to talk about emotional responses. I think the strength of this is that it does. I mean, for me, it doesn't evoke an emotional response. It's an intellectual one. And that's why I think it's good, because it's not sentimental.
You can have both, though. You can have an intellectual response and an emotional response, can't you?
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think it's often, that there's a lot of sentimental twaddle about the First World War, which none of us remember. It can only be ersatz, our emotions. But this doesn't try and pull on the heartstrings.
No, I guess I didn't. Yeah, it wasn't. I guess there's a thing where you have an art moment. I don't know. Everyone must have had an art moment in front of art that
an art
that's
you get an art
thing.
Yeah.
And the bits of this where you did that. So that's a score, isn't it? Really.
It's a matter of approach. I mean,
yes.
you don't always approach things intellectually. You sort of approach them emotionally and then become intellectual about if they interest you. Well, that's possible.
And I wonder it can go both ways as well. I mean, I understood the intellectual concept of this before I saw it, and so to have that emotional response as well is a fantastic thing.
Which is normally an initial response,
and
which
then
makes you more interested, and then
you go and learn some more.
Yeah, and you explore.
So can you tell us a bit about how you began collaborating and how you worked together? Because it struck me when you were talking that it's quite distinctly individual work within the whole. I mean, the exhibition is a whole, but you've all got quite different working styles and made quite different work. So how did you negotiate that?
Well, we were all aware of each other's work. What was the gelling point?
Do you know, I think it really developed through conversations. It was all about conversations. When we got together and we were researching and coming across, and of course people brought information to us, and we would come together and we'd share it, and then that would resonate in someone else's work and possibly not mine. You know, I would come into the conversation and you know, somebody else would pick that up, and it would have meaning for them. And there was a constant sort of sharing back and forth, which just happened completely naturally. But it was a spoken thing, really.
Over what period of time? So what was the
Well,
gestation period?
14 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, over a year. So he said, I think you're absolutely right, because Prue found me a kind of the thumbs up, which was key to my work, but not something that she could use. So she kind of gave that, said, "Oh, I think you might be interested in that."
We were just actually generous with each other because it was pleasurable. We got a big kick out of sharing all the research, didn't we?
Yes, I mean, I think that's what was the fun bit. Was like show and tell every week.
Yeah.
What have you got?
Did you meet every week for a year?
No, maybe that's.
We did meet a fair few times.
Yeah, every couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's probably a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
An awful lot of emailing. That's what's great about the thing that you don't like, Peter. Communication. I think that's what it is. Like communication, and I think also there was no kind of power struggle. We're all not big egos. No egos.
So it seems to me you weren't competing on the same ground, were you, really?
No.
No.
You know,
The only time we competed was when there was catering involved.
Oh yes.
Who can make the best cake?
Oh yes. Long discussions about.
Became women. So.
Cake one-upmanship. The cake and art is a very important combination. Did you intentionally cover different subject areas, or did it fall that way because of your own interest in your practices anyway?
The drawing was probably the first thing in the bag, and then you had always wanted to do film, hadn't you, Susan?
You approached me and asked me specifically to do that, because I've worked with Prue before using film, and we did a little bit of looking around and gathering of information before honed in a particular subject. But I was working on other projects in my work which revolved around kind of hidden things and secret things, and so that sort of, you know, almost resonated a bit with the idea of Porton Down, which is very closed and high security. And I had to make a decision at the start whether I would engage them and involve them, and that would hopefully give me access to the information I wanted. But that also ran the risk of me having the film pulled at the last minute. I just didn't know what the situation was, or doing it entirely by myself, not having any worries about overstepping the mark security-wise. But I chose to involve them and work with them, which was a really difficult journey, but it proved to become central to the work then, because the boundaries that were on the plane, which I did come across physically when there was firing, when we were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the boundaries within what is now DSTL, which is the organisation that work, and they're the laboratories at Porton Down, and their security is very, very high, and they're very concerned about what information is given out. You can see from the film that the only filming I was allowed to do was some of the road leading up to Porton Down, and then the film, as it got closer, was taken off me.
Can I ask you, you know, when you approach making a film, do you start with a narrative? I mean, how does it work? Or do you start with visual imagery and then you you work it together.
Yeah, it's a bit like using a sketchbook.
Right.
You just, and the same with my studio, which has got bits and pieces of everything. I just literally gather bits and pieces of sound and film footage, research.
So it's kind of collaging, isn't it?
It's a collage, really, and I bring them all together. The central part of the film was an experiment, and it is a complete remake of that, visually, of that experiment. So I remade the outfit, is exactly as it was in the film, and yeah, so it's a collaging, and it grows itself, really. It really does grow itself.
Because they do sort of, every work, I don't know, it's probably true, every work takes on its own life, doesn't it?
It does, and it just, it's almost, like just touching it and it comes together somehow.
And you
So
felt
no,
that
there's
that
no
really
narrative
happened.
to start with, no.
Right.
Mhm.
In your question that you're asking, how do artists navigate difficult ground? For instance, medically, if we have to involve people in research, we actually have to go to an ethics committee to judge whether what is going on is ethical. Does anything like that happen with artists?
No, I don't think that's our
Or do
role.
they have the
Don't think.
freedom to say
We're
what they
completely
think
not
about
political, so
This is not a judgment thing, and also I think it's navigating difficult ground is not just referring to Porton Down, it's referring to the much bigger issue of World War I as a whole. So we're going
But
across
you
that.
think You should.
I actually thought, and when I saw that, I thought my initial thing was navigate, just to formulate these three artists coming together and creating a position where they could work together was, in a sense,
Yes,
difficult
but the
ground.
question, that was asked.
I think
Can
what you're highlighting.
I'll give an example of what I think difficult ground is, leastwise for me. It's easy to romanticise war, and art is limited. It's in either 2D or we've got a three-dimensional aspect with sound and vision. But context is missing, and also smell, emotion, and death is all missing. Very few pieces of art that capture that. Guernica may be one of the notable exceptions. So how do you as artists not romanticise war?
well, how can you romanticize?
Well, you can look at, taking earlier on, the faded aspect of art is quite popular nowadays. I could look at this picture that's behind you and take a romantic view of it, rather than something where you decay or something that's necessary to conduct war. It's a set trend, for example. So how do you move away, or maybe one shouldn't move away, from a romantic image of war? If you look at military museums, they are full of horses charging, men dying, and all the rest of it. And you can look at it in a romantic context. The smell, the death, and the stuff that you're missing.
Perhaps it's not known that 2 out of the 3 of us have direct experience for a start, but it's not working directly with war, it's conflict, and there are many layers of conflict, past, present.
Okay. I think that was the
Scarring.
point I was trying to make, is that I don't think this exhibition does romanticise.
That's why it's
I'm
called
not saying about sex
Cicatrix.
I'm just more saying there's a difficulty for an artist to do something